This video is designed to help you relax and fall asleep. Through calm narration, we explore biblical archaeology as a slow journey through time. There are no conclusions. Only traces, debates, and silence. Biblical Archaeology. 100 Mysteries and Lesser-Known Facts. Chapter 1. Before the Bible, an already sacred world. Before the first words of Genesis were written down. Before Moses received the law on Mount Sinai. Before Abraham left the city of Ur. There was already a world here. A populated world. An organized world. A believing world. The land that would become the biblical stage was not virgin territory. Temples already rose toward the heavens. Priests already performed their rituals. Scribes already traced the first letters of what would eventually become our alphabet. In this first chapter, let us explore together this pre-biblical world. This ancient Canaan already saturated with the sacred, this fertile crescent already teeming with gods and symbols. For to understand the Bible, we must first understand what came before it. Part 1. Enigmatic Canaanite Objects. Imagine yourself standing at Tel Hazer, in the Galilee region of northern Israel. This is one of the largest archaeological sites in the country. For decades now, teams of archaeologists have been excavating here, digging layer by layer to reveal the secrets of this ancient Canaanite city. In 2018, Professor Amnon Bentor's team from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem uncovered some rather mysterious objects in one of the Canaanite temples at the site. There were sculpted stone cylinders, perfectly polished. Ceramic vessels of unusual design. Bronze objects whose purpose remains unclear. Were these ritual instruments used in religious ceremonies? Were they administrative tools for recording transactions? Were they measuring devices of some kind? The truth is, we don't really know. The objects date from the Middle and Late Bronze Age, roughly 1800 to 1200 BCE. This was well before the presumed period of the Israelite conquest described in the biblical book of Joshua. These enigmatic Canaanite objects remind us of something essential. The biblical world was not born from nothing. It emerged from a pre-existing civilization, one that was already sophisticated, already organized, already deeply religious. Each object discovered by archaeologists raises more questions than it answers. And perhaps that's the beauty of this field. This ability to make us wonder, to make us dream, to transport us back through the millennia. Part 2. A 5,000-year-old Canaanite wine press. Wine. This drink flows through biblical narratives like blood through veins. Noah planted the first vineyard after the flood. Jesus transformed water into wine at Cana. The psalmist praised wine as something that gladdens the heart of man. But the history of wine in the Holy Land is much, much older than the Bible itself. In 2020, Dr. Yossi Garfinkel's archaeological team made a fascinating discovery at Tel Kabri, in western Galilee. They found a wine press dating back nearly 5,000 years, to approximately 1900 BCE. This press was remarkably well preserved. It revealed a level of vinicultural sophistication that surprised many researchers. There were stone basins for crushing the grapes. Carefully carved channels allowed the must to flow from one basin to another. Large storage jars had been buried in the ground nearby to maintain an optimal temperature for fermentation. The Canaanites, it seems, were master winemakers. Chemical analyses performed on organic residues found inside the storage jars confirmed the presence of wine. But there was something else, too. The residue also contained traces of aromatic additives, honey, mint, and cinnamon. The ancient Canaanites weren't drinking simple wine. They were drinking spiced wine, perfumed wine, carefully prepared beverages likely used in their religious ceremonies. This 5,000-year-old wine press tells us something important. When the Bible mentions wine and vineyards, it is drawing upon a viticultural tradition already millennia old. The wine that Abraham might have drunk, that Moses poured as a libation, that Jesus blessed at the Last Supper. All of this wine was heir to techniques and knowledge forged during the Canaanite Bronze Age. Archaeology reveals these unsuspected continuities, these fragile threads that connect us to the very dawn of civilization. Part 3. V-shaped lines in a Canaanite temple. Sometimes in archaeology, it's the smallest details that prove most intriguing. At Lachish, an ancient fortified city in southern Israel, excavations directed by Professor Yosef Garfinkel in 2017 revealed the remains of a Bronze Age Canaanite temple. What caught the archaeologists' attention were some mysterious incisions carved into the temple floor. These were precise V-shaped lines, arranged in regular geometric patterns. They were not random scratches or accidental marks. They were deliberate engravings, carefully carved into the stone with considerable effort. But what did these V-shapes mean? Several theories have been proposed over the years. Perhaps they were astronomical markers, carefully aligned with the sun or stars at specific moments of the year. Perhaps they represented sacred mountains, with the inverted V evoking a mountain peak. Perhaps they delimited ritual spaces, creating invisible frontiers between the profane and the sacred. In 2019, Dr. Aaron Burke of UCLA proposed an interesting interpretation. He suggested that these marks might have been boundary markers, signaling zones where only priests were permitted to enter. Similar markings have been found in other temples throughout the ancient Near East, which suggests the existence of a common symbolic language shared across different cultures. These V-shaped lines carved into the Canaanite temple floor remind us that the sacred is not expressed only through words. It is also inscribed in space, materialized in lines and marks and boundaries. The Canaanites, like the Israelites who came after them, believed that the earth itself could be holy, that certain places were charged with divine presence. These simple V's, engraved some 3,500 years ago, still bear witness to this ancient belief in the sacredness of space. Part 4. The Inscriptions of Serabit el-Khadim. In the heart of the Sinai Peninsula, far from any inhabited lands, rises an arid mountain where the ancient Egyptians once extracted turquoise. This site is called Serabit el-Khadim. Here, they built a temple dedicated to Hathor, the Egyptian goddess of love and beauty. But it's not the Egyptian temple that interests us most today. It's the graffiti. Dozens of inscriptions were carved into the rocks surrounding the mine, written in a script that is neither fully hieroglyphic nor fully alphabetic. It represents something in between, a transitional script, a missing link in the history of writing. These inscriptions were first discovered in 1905 by the renowned British archaeologist Flinders Petrie. In the 1940s, William Albright succeeded in deciphering them. He called this script proto-Sinaitic. The inscriptions date to approximately 1850 BCE, and they represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to transcribe language using an alphabet rather than pictographic symbols. Who carved these mysterious signs into the rock? Most likely, they were Canaanite workers employed by the Egyptians to labor in the turquoise mines. These workers adapted certain Egyptian hieroglyphs, simplifying them to create signs that represented sounds rather than complete ideas or objects. This was revolutionary. It was, in essence, the birth of the phonetic alphabet. In 2016, Dr. Orly Goldwasser of Hebrew University proposed that many of these inscriptions were actually invocations to a Canaanite goddess called Baalat, which means the lady. The mine workers were praying to their deity, asking for protection in these harsh and hostile lands. The inscriptions of Serabit el-Khadim offer us a rather delicious irony. Here, in the Sinai, where biblical tradition places the revelation of the Torah to Moses, archaeologists have discovered the precursor of the very alphabet in which the Torah would eventually be written. The Sinai is doubly sacred. It is the place of divine revelation and religious tradition, but also the crucible where humanity learned to write. Part 5. The Gezer Tablet and Proto-Alphabet. The Gezer Tablet was discovered in 1929 by archaeologist Robert McAllister during excavations at the ancient city of Gezer. It's a small piece of limestone bearing an inscription in Proto-Canaanite script, dating to around 1000 BCE. The text appears to be a scribe's writing exercise. Someone, perhaps a young student, repeatedly traced the letters of the emerging Canaanite alphabet. These simple exercises, practiced by anonymous students some 3,000 years ago, testify to the existence of schools, of scribal training programs, of systematic intellectual transmission. In 2021, Dr. Christopher Rolston of George Washington University published a detailed study tracing the evolution of the Canaanite alphabet into ancient Hebrew. This transformation occurred between approximately 1200 and 1000 BCE. The Gezer tablet serves as a crucial witness to this linguistic transition. What's fascinating about this discovery is its very modesty. This is not a royal inscription proclaiming great victories. It's not a sacred text revealing divine mysteries. It's simply a student's exercise, someone practicing their letters. This reminds us that behind all great civilizations, behind all sacred texts, there are always anonymous individuals, scribes, students, teachers, patiently transmitting knowledge from one generation to the next. The Gezer calendar. Still at Gezer, but a different discovery this time. In 1908, McAllister found a small limestone tablet, just 10 centimeters in length, bearing what appears to be an agricultural calendar. This is one of the oldest Hebrew inscriptions ever discovered. It dates to the 10th century BCE, the presumed Solomonic era. The text is simple but quite beautiful in its rhythm: 2 months of harvest, 2 months of planting, 2 months of late sowing. 1 month of hoeing flax. 1 month of barley harvest. 1 month of harvest and festivity. 2 months of vine tending. 1 month of summer fruit. This calendar reveals a society fundamentally centered on agriculture. Time was not measured by abstract numbers on a modern clock, but by the rhythms of agricultural work. Each season had its appointed task, its particular rhythm, its sense of expectation and fulfillment. In 2019, the paleographer Dr. Ada Yardini confirmed that this calendar is indeed one of the oldest texts written in ancient Hebrew. It offers us a precious glimpse into daily life in ancient Israel, showing us how ordinary people organized their year. The Gezer calendar reminds us that Israelite religion was intimately linked to agricultural cycles. The great biblical festivals, Passover, Pentecost, the Feast of Tabernacles, all originally celebrated harvests and agricultural milestones. Sacred time and agricultural time were one and the same. The divine calendar followed the seasons of planting and reaping. Part 7. Sometimes archaeology reminds us of our own brevity in the long span of human history. Beidha is a Neolithic site located near Petra in northern Jordan. It dates back to approximately 9000 BCE. That's 11,000 years ago. 6 millennia before Abraham. 8 millennia before Moses. The site was first excavated in the 1960s by archaeologist Diana Kirkbride. It was re-examined more recently, in 2015, by Dr. Bill Finlayson. Beidha reveals a crucial transitional period in human history, the shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture and settled life. The inhabitants of Beidha first built circular houses, then later rectangular ones. They stored grain in carefully constructed silos. They crafted sophisticated stone tools. They practiced rituals whose exact nature escapes us today, but which clearly testify to an active spiritual life. In his 2015 study, Finlayson demonstrated that Beidha was part of an extensive exchange network spanning hundreds of kilometers. Obsidian from Anatolia has been found at the site. Red Sea shells. Turquoise from the Sinai. These Neolithic people were already trading, already communicating, already connecting with distant communities. Beidha humbles us. When we speak of biblical times as ancient history, we sometimes forget that the biblical narratives themselves are relatively recent in the long human story of this region. Before the Bible, before writing, before cities and kingdoms, there were already millennia of human life here, of civilization, of belief, of creativity. Part 8. Nubian ivory from the Levant. The ancient world was far more connected than we sometimes imagine. In 2017, at Megiddo in northern Israel, archaeologists discovered several carved ivory objects dating to the Late Bronze Age, around 1400 to 1200 BCE. Chemical analysis of these ivory pieces revealed something surprising. The ivory had not come from local sources or even from nearby regions. It had originated in Nubia, in what is now southern Egypt and northern Sudan. This was elephant ivory that had traveled thousands of kilometers to reach Canaan. In 2019, Dr. Lindell Webster led a comprehensive study of ivory trade routes in the Late Bronze Age. Her research showed that ivory moved along established commercial networks, passing through Egypt, then up through the Levantine coast, finally reaching inland sites like Megiddo. These beautifully carved ivory pieces were luxury items, symbols of wealth and power. They were used to decorate furniture, to create ceremonial objects, to display status. The presence of Nubian ivory at Canaanite sites tells us about long-distance trade, about diplomatic exchanges, about a world already deeply interconnected. When we read biblical references to ivory thrones and ivory palaces, we should remember this context. The biblical world was not isolated. It was part of vast commercial networks that stretched from Africa to Mesopotamia, from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. Part 9. A Babylonian hymn to Marduk recovered. Among the thousands of cuneiform tablets preserved in museums around the world, some hold particular interest for understanding the biblical context. In 2018, Dr. Nathan Wasserman of Hebrew University published a new translation of an ancient Babylonian hymn dedicated to Marduk, the chief god of Babylon. The tablet containing this hymn had been excavated decades earlier, but it had remained largely unstudied in museum storage. Wasserman's careful work revealed that the hymn dates to approximately 1200 BCE, making it contemporary with the early Israelite period. The hymn praises Marduk as creator, as warrior, as divine judge. The theological language bears striking similarities to certain biblical psalms. Both praise their respective deities using similar metaphors, as storm gods, as shepherds of their people, as sources of justice and order. This doesn't mean the biblical authors copied from Babylonian texts. Rather, it suggests that there was a shared religious vocabulary throughout the ancient Near East, a common way of speaking about the divine that transcended individual cultures. The Babylonian hymn to Marduk reminds us that Israelite religion did not develop in a vacuum. It was part of a larger conversation, a wider religious landscape. The biblical authors knew these neighboring traditions, engaged with them, sometimes adopted their language while transforming its meaning. Part 10. Cuneiform Curse Tablets. Ancient people could be remarkably practical about their grievances. In 2019, a collection of Mesopotamian curse tablets was published in a comprehensive study by Dr. Daniel Schwiemer of the University of Würzburg. These small clay tablets, inscribed in cuneiform script, contain curses directed at personal enemies. They date from various periods, ranging from 1800 to 500 BCE. People would write the name of someone who had wronged them, then invoke divine punishment upon that person. The curses are sometimes quite specific. May his fields yield no harvest, may his wife be barren, may his business ventures fail, may sleep flee from him. These tablets reveal the everyday concerns and conflicts of ordinary people, property disputes, family quarrels, business rivalries. Similar practices are mentioned in the Bible, though usually disapprovingly. The biblical texts warn against cursing others, against seeking supernatural revenge. But the existence of these Mesopotamian curse tablets shows how common such practices were throughout the ancient Near East. These cuneiform curse tablets close our first act with a reminder of shared humanity. The people of the ancient world faced problems much like ours: difficult neighbors, business competitors, family tensions. Their methods of dealing with these problems may seem foreign to us, but their fundamental concerns remain recognizable across the millennia. We have explored the pre-biblical world. A world of ancient writing systems, of sophisticated crafts, of religious practices that would influence what came later. Now let us cross the threshold into the biblical period itself. Let us turn our attention to the holy places, the altars, the temples, to those sacred spaces where, according to tradition, the divine and human realms met. Chapter 2. God, altars, and lost sanctuaries. We now enter the heart of the sacred territory itself. The places where, according to biblical tradition, God manifested His presence. Where sacrifices rose toward heaven. Where the covenant between the divine and human was sealed and renewed. But where are these holy places today? Can archaeology find material traces of the tabernacle, of ancient altars, of sanctuaries mentioned in the biblical texts? The answers, as we shall see, are complex, sometimes surprising, always fascinating. In this second chapter, we explore 10 discoveries related to sacred architecture and religious practice in the biblical world. Part 11. A possible site of the tabernacle. The Bible describes a portable sanctuary called the Tabernacle, a tent that accompanied the Israelites during their wilderness wanderings. According to the text, this tabernacle was later established at a place called Shiloh, in the hill country of Samaria. In 2012, a Danish-led excavation team began new work at Tel Shiloh, about 30 kilometers north of Jerusalem. The team was directed by archaeologists from the College of Copenhagen and Bar-Ilan University. They discovered a large flat area dating to the Iron Age period, approximately 1200 to 1000 BCE. This would correspond to the presumed period when the Tabernacle stood at Shiloh. The excavators found an arrangement of post holes forming a rectangular pattern, suggesting that some kind of large structure had once stood here. Around this area, they found numerous animal bones, sheep, goats, cattle. Many of these bones showed signs of ritual butchering, consistent with sacrificial practices. There were also ceramic vessels of types typically associated with cultic activity. Can we definitively say this was the site of the biblical tabernacle? No, we cannot. The identification remains possible but not certain. The evidence is suggestive but not conclusive. Yet the discovery reminds us that Shiloh was indeed an important religious center in the early Iron Age, just as the biblical text describes. Part 12. The Ark of the Covenant, central yet unfound. The Ark of the Covenant occupies a central place in biblical narrative. It was said to contain the stone tablets of the law given to Moses. It represented the very presence of God among his people. The Bible describes it in considerable detail, a chest of acacia wood, overlaid with gold, with 2 cherubim on its lid. According to the biblical account, the ark was housed in the first temple built by Solomon. But when the Babylonians destroyed the temple in 586 BCE, the ark vanished from the historical record. It is not mentioned among the temple treasures taken to Babylon. It does not appear in descriptions of the second temple built after the exile. Where did the ark go? Many theories have been proposed over the centuries. Some suggest it was hidden before the Babylonian conquest. Some claim it was destroyed. Some believe it was taken to Ethiopia, to Egypt, or hidden in secret chambers beneath the Temple Mount. Despite countless searches and sensational claims, no credible archaeological evidence for the ark has ever been found. In 2018, Dr. Norma Franklin of the University of Haifa published a thorough review of ark theories, concluding that none have substantial archaeological support. The missing ark remains one of biblical archaeology's greatest mysteries. Perhaps it was destroyed. Perhaps it lies hidden somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the question of its physical location matters less than its symbolic significance. The ark endures as a powerful symbol, whether or not its physical form can ever be recovered. Part 13. A mysterious altar on Mount Ebal. Mount Ebal, near Shechem, is where Joshua built an altar according to Deuteronomy. In the 1980s, Adam Zertel discovered a massive stone structure there. The structure dates to around 1200 BCE, exactly the presumed conquest period. It's built of unhewn stones, as the law commands. Inside, thousands of animal bones, mainly young male cattle, sheep, goats, typical of sacrificial offerings. No pig bones, typical of Israelite sites. Some scholars question whether it's truly an altar. In 2019, Ralph Hawkins reanalyzed the evidence, arguing it fits the biblical description remarkably well. The Mount Ebal structure remains debated, but it testifies to cultic activity in the early Israelite period. Part 14. The Temple of Arad. At Tel Arad in the Negev, archaeologists found something unexpected, a temple to YHWH outside Jerusalem. Discovered by Yohanan Aharoni in the 1960s, This 8th century BCE temple featured a Holy of Holies, an altar, standing stones representing YHWH. This contradicts the biblical ideal of centralized worship in Jerusalem. Yet here was a legitimate YHWH temple in a Judean fortress. Inscriptions found at the site mention priestly names, offerings, religious activities. In 2017, Nadav Naaman published a comprehensive study of Arad's religious significance. The Arad temple reveals that ancient Israelite religion was more diverse than the Bible suggests. Jerusalem's monopoly on worship was an ideal, not always the reality. Part 15. The Beersheba Well and Horned Altars. Beersheba, Well of the Oath, features prominently in Genesis as a patriarchal site. Excavations revealed a prosperous Iron Age city. Among the finds, stones from a dismantled horned altar, deliberately taken apart and reused in a wall. The altar dates to the 8th century BCE. This matches biblical accounts of King Hezekiah's religious reforms, when he centralized worship in Jerusalem and destroyed outlying altars. The reconstructed altar is now displayed in the Israel Museum. Ze'ev Herzog's excavation showed the altar was carefully dismantled, not violently destroyed. The Beersheba altar provides archaeological evidence for biblical reforms, showing how religious policy translated into physical action. Part 16. The altar at Ain Dara. North of Israel, in Syria, stands Ain Dara, a temple bearing striking resemblance to Solomon's temple described in the Bible. Built around 1000 BC, contemporary with Solomon, it features a tripartite plan, entrance hall, main hall, inner sanctum, exactly like the biblical description. Giant footprints carved in stone near the entrance suggest a deity's presence. Cherubim and palm decorations match biblical descriptions. In 2012, John Monson published detailed comparison showing Ain Dara helps us understand Solomon's temple architecture within its regional context. Tragically, the temple was severely damaged in 2018 during the Syrian conflict. Ain Dara shows that Solomon's temple, while unique in its dedication to YHWH alone, followed regional architectural traditions. Part 17. Rediscovery of a temple at the City of David. In Jerusalem's City of David, the oldest part of the ancient city, archaeologist Elad Mazar has conducted extensive excavations since the early 2000s. Among her discoveries, possible remains of David's palace and, nearby, what may be a temple or cultic structure from the 10th century BCE. The structure contained ritual objects, fine pottery, and architectural elements suggesting religious use. However, identification remains debated. In 2015, Mazar published her findings, arguing this could be an early Israelite shrine predating Solomon's temple. The City of David temple, if confirmed, would show religious activity in Jerusalem before the Great Temple, revealing the city's gradual sacralization. Part 18. Pre-Israelite temple reused at the City of David. Deeper excavations at the City of David revealed even older structures. Canaanite/Jebusite remains predating David's conquest. Some of these structures appear to have been reused by early Israelites. What was once a Canaanite shrine may have been adapted for YHWH worship. This pattern of religious continuity and transformation appears throughout Israel. Sacred sites remained sacred even as the deity changed. In 2018, Arenmer's research on Philistine sites showed similar patterns. Religious spaces endured across cultural changes. Reused temples remind us that sacred geography often predates specific religious traditions. Places themselves carry holiness. Part 19. Kuntaladadrud, YHWH and his Asherah. At Kuntaladadrud, a remote site in the Sinai, archaeologists found inscriptions that shocked biblical scholars. Dating to around 800 BCE, the inscriptions mention YHWH and his Asherah, suggesting the Israelite god had a consort, the goddess Asherah. This contradicts biblical monotheism. Yet here, in Hebrew script, was clear evidence that some Israelites worshipped YHWH alongside a female deity. Debate continues. Some argue Asherah refers to a sacred tree, not a goddess. In 2012, Judith Hadley published a comprehensive study of the evidence. Kuntaladadrud reveals that monotheism was a long process, not an instant reality. Popular religion often differed from official theology. Part 20. Reassessments of regional cults. Recent decades have seen major reassessments of how Israelite religion actually functioned throughout the land. Rather than uniform worship centered in Jerusalem, evidence suggests diverse regional practices, local shrines, varied theological understandings. Sites like Dan, Bethel, Beersheba, Arad all had their own cultic centers. Family shrines existed in homes. Pillar figurines, possibly representing Asherah, appear widely. In 2017, a comprehensive volume edited by Francesca Stavrakopoulou and John Barton examined this diversity, showing ancient Israelite religion was far more varied than the Bible suggests. These reassessments close our second act by reminding us that biblical religion evolved over centuries, shaped by reforms, debates, and grassroots practices that archaeology continues to reveal. Chapter 3. Kings, Kingdoms, and Explosive Debates. The Bible speaks of great kings. David, who slew Goliath and united the tribes. Solomon, renowned for his wisdom and his magnificent temple. These figures loom large in religious tradition and cultural memory. But what does archaeology tell us about these monarchs? Did they truly exist? Were their kingdoms as grand as the biblical texts suggest? These questions have sparked decades of scholarly debate, sometimes quite heated. In this third chapter, we explore 10 discoveries that touch upon these royal controversies. Evidence that sometimes confirms, sometimes complicates, always enriches our understanding of the biblical kingdoms. Part 21. When pottery reshuffles the cards of David and Solomon. For much of the 20th century, archaeologists used pottery styles to date different layers of excavation. Each period had its characteristic ceramic forms. The Iron Age II period, roughly 1000 to 586 BCE, was traditionally associated with the united monarchy of David and Solomon. In the 1990s, however, Dr. Israel Finkelstein of Tel Aviv University proposed a revolutionary redating. He argued that pottery forms previously assigned to the 10th century BCE actually dated to the 9th century. This would mean that monumental structures attributed to Solomon were actually built by later kings. This proposal, called the low chronology, sparked intense scholarly debate. Dr. Amihai Mazar of Hebrew University defended the traditional high chronology, arguing that the pottery evidence supported the earlier dates. Between 2005 and 2020, numerous radiocarbon dating projects were conducted at key sites. The results have been mixed, with some supporting earlier dates and others later ones. In 2020, Dr. Yosef Garfinkel published findings from Khirbet Qiyafah suggesting that monumental architecture did exist in the 10th century. The debate continues, more nuanced now than before. Pottery chronology reminds us that dating ancient sites is complex work, requiring multiple lines of evidence. Small changes in how we date ceramic forms can have large implications for how we understand biblical history. Part 22. The Fortifications of Khirbet Qiyafah. Khirbet Qiyafah sits on a hilltop overlooking the Elah Valley, about 30 kilometers southwest of Jerusalem. This is the valley where, according to the biblical account, David fought Goliath. Excavations began here in 2007, directed by Professor Yosef Garfinkel of Hebrew University and Sar Ganner of the Israel Antiquities Authority. They uncovered a fortified city dating to the early 10th century BCE, precisely the time of David. The site is surrounded by a massive wall, built of large stones fitted together without mortar. This casemate wall, as it's called, runs for about 700 meters around the city. Two gates provide entry, an unusual feature since most cities had only one gate. Radiocarbon dating of olive pits found at the site consistently return dates between 1020 and 980 BCE. Inside the fortifications, archaeologists found residential buildings, storage facilities, and cultic rooms. Interestingly, no pig bones were found at the site, which is unusual for Canaanite or Philistine settlements but typical of Israelite ones. Several ostraca pottery shards with writing were discovered, inscribed in an early form of Hebrew script. Garfinkel argues that Khirbet Qiyafah demonstrates the existence of a centralized Israelite state in the 10th century. Others remain more cautious, noting that one fortified city does not necessarily prove a kingdom. The site continues to be studied, its implications still debated. Part 23. The Tel Dan Stele and the House of David. In 1993, archaeologist Avraham Byron was excavating at Tel Dan in northern Israel. His team found fragments of a black basalt stone bearing an Aramaic inscription. The discovery would prove remarkably significant. The inscription, dated to the 9th century BCE, commemorates a victory by an Aramean king, probably Hazael of Damascus. In describing his conquests, the text mentions the king of Israel and the king of the house of David. This was the first time the name David had been found in an ancient inscription outside the Bible. The phrase House of David clearly refers to a royal dynasty. The stele was written only about a century after David's presumed lifetime. Some scholars had previously questioned whether David was a historical figure or merely a legendary character. The Tel Dan stele provided concrete evidence that a Davidic dynasty was recognized by Israel's neighbors in the 9th century BCE. In 2019, Dr. Andrew Knapp published a comprehensive study of the stele's historical context, placing it within the regional conflicts described in the biblical books of Kings. The Tel Dan stele doesn't prove every detail of the biblical David story. But it does confirm that a dynasty bearing his name ruled in Judah, and that this dynasty was significant enough for enemies to mention it in their victory inscriptions. Part 24. Solomon's Stables at Megiddo. Megiddo is one of the most excavated sites in Israel. Layer upon layer of ancient cities have been uncovered here, testifying to millennia of occupation. The site overlooks the Jezreel Valley, controlling important trade routes. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Chicago expedition led by archaeologists P.L.O. Guy and Gordon Loud uncovered impressive structures they identified as stables. Large buildings with stone pillars and feeding troughs seemed designed for housing horses. The Bible mentions that Solomon had many horses and chariots. The book of 1 Kings states he had stalls for 40,000 horses. The excavators naturally connected these structures to Solomon's legendary stables. However, Yigal Yadin's excavations in the 1960s and Israel Finkelstein's work in the 1990s suggested these structures actually dated to the 9th century BCE, the time of King Ahab rather than Solomon. Furthermore, some scholars question whether they were stables at all, proposing they might have been storage facilities or marketplaces. In 2013, Dr. Matthew Adams and colleagues published radiocarbon dates from Megiddo supporting the later dating. The debate over Solomon's stables illustrates how archaeological interpretation can change as new evidence emerges and new dating methods become available. Whether built by Solomon or Ahab, the structures at Megiddo testify to the importance of chariot warfare in ancient Israel. They remind us that biblical kings did maintain substantial military establishments, even if specific attributions remain uncertain. Part 25. Megiddo, Biblical Battle and Armageddon. Megiddo holds a special place not only in archaeological history but also in religious imagination. The site's strategic location made it the scene of numerous ancient battles. The biblical Book of Judges describes a battle there. The Book of Kings records King Josiah's death at Megiddo in 609 BCE. In the New Testament book of Revelation, the name appears in Greek form, Armageddon, meaning Mount of Megiddo. This apocalyptic text describes it as the site of a final cosmic battle between good and evil. Archaeological excavations have confirmed Megiddo's military importance throughout history. Massive fortification walls from different periods have been uncovered. Water systems were carved through bedrock to sustain the city during sieges. In 2016, Dr. Israel Finkelstein and colleagues published evidence of battle destruction at the site dating to the late 10th century BCE. Arrowheads, burnt layers, and hastily buried bodies all testify to violent conflict. Megiddo's journey from ancient battlefield to apocalyptic symbol shows how physical places can take on layers of meaning over time. The hill that witnessed real historical battles became, in religious imagination, the ultimate symbol of cosmic conflict. Part 26. The Mesha Stele and the Kingdom of Moab. In 1868, a Bedouin discovered a remarkable stone monument at Dibon in Jordan. This black basalt stele bore a lengthy inscription in the Moabite language, closely related to ancient Hebrew. The inscription was commissioned by King Mesha of Moab around 840 BCE. It describes his building projects and, most significantly, his successful revolt against Israelite domination. The biblical book of 2 Kings also mentions this revolt, though from an Israelite perspective. The stele mentions several biblical places, Nebo, Dibon, and Medeba. It also refers to Omri, king of Israel, and describes how Mesha freed his people from Israelite control. This provides independent confirmation of events and figures mentioned in the Bible. Interestingly, the stele also mentions Mesha's deity, Chemosh, to whom he attributes his military success. This parallel religious language attributing victory to one's god appears in both Moabite and Israelite texts. In 2019, a team led by Dr. André Lemaire used advanced imaging techniques to clarify some disputed readings on the stele. One controversial line may mention the House of David, though this reading remains debated. The Mesha stele reminds us that Israel's neighbors also kept records of their history. These external sources sometimes confirm, sometimes contradict, sometimes complement the biblical account. Together, they help us reconstruct the complex political landscape of the ancient Levant. Part 27. The Tel-Metan stele and Ekron. In 1996, during excavations at Tel-Metan in Israel, archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery. They found a dedicatory inscription in a temple, dating to the 7th century BCE. The inscription was written in a Phoenician-style script. It commemorated the building of the temple and mentioned 5 royal names, including Achish son of Padi son of Ysd son of Ada son of Yoar, ruler of Ekron. This was the first time the name Ekron had been found in an ancient inscription at the actual site. Ekron was one of the 5 major Philistine cities mentioned frequently in the Bible. The inscription definitively identified Tel-Metan as ancient Ekron. Interestingly, the name Achish appears in the Bible. A Philistine king named Achish ruled the city of Gath in the time of David. While this inscription refers to a later king, it confirms that Achish was indeed a Philistine royal name. Excavations directed by Trude Dothan and Seymour Gittin revealed that Ekron was a major olive oil production center in the 7th century BCE. Over 100 olive oil presses were found, suggesting an industrial-scale operation. The Tel-Metan inscription provides a rare glimpse into Philistine culture and religion. These frequent biblical antagonists left few written records. This single inscription helps us understand their language, their royal traditions, their religious practices. Part 28. Philistine gates at Ashdod. Ashdod was another of the 5 major Philistine cities. It's mentioned numerous times in the Bible, most famously as the place where the captured Ark of the Covenant was brought, causing divine plagues. Excavations at Tel Ashdod, conducted by various teams since the 1960s, have revealed impressive fortifications. In 2015, Dr. Alexander Fantakin of Tel Aviv University published a comprehensive study of the site's gate systems. The gates at Ashdod show sophisticated architectural planning. They feature multiple chambers, where guards could be stationed. Massive stone walls flanked the entrances. These weren't simple openings in a wall, they were complex defensive structures. The gate architecture at Philistine sites like Ashdod differs from typical Israelite gates of the same period. This suggests distinct architectural traditions, even though the cultures existed side by side for centuries. Fantakin's work revealed that the gates were rebuilt and modified several times, reflecting the city's changing fortunes. Periods of prosperity saw expansion and strengthening. Periods of decline saw hasty repairs. The gates at Ashdod tell us about more than just defense. They were also social spaces where business was conducted, justice administered, news exchanged. The biblical book of Ruth mentions the city gate as a place of legal proceedings. Archaeology confirms this multifunctional role. Part 29. Phoenician helmets from Philistia. In 2018, during excavations at Tel Shimron in northern Israel, archaeologists discovered fragments of bronze helmets. Chemical analysis revealed they were Phoenician in origin, dating to around the 8th century BCE. What makes this discovery intriguing is the location. Tel Shimron is not in Phoenicia proper, which was centered along the Lebanese coast. The helmets were found in a region that had Philistine connections, suggesting trade or military exchanges. The helmets are of a style called crested helmets, with a ridge running from front to back. Similar helmets appear in Assyrian reliefs depicting Phoenician soldiers. They were sophisticated pieces of military equipment, expensive to produce. Dr. Daniel Master, who led the excavation, proposed that these helmets might have been war booty, diplomatic gifts, or evidence of mercenary activity. The ancient Levant saw constant military conflicts, with soldiers and equipment moving between different kingdoms. These Phoenician helmets in Philistine territory remind us of the interconnectedness of the ancient world. Military technology, like trade goods, crossed cultural boundaries. The biblical narrative often presents clear ethnic divisions, but material culture reveals a more complex, blended reality. Part 30. The Amarna Letters. In 1887, in the ruins of the ancient Egyptian city of Akhetaten, modern Tel El Amarna, local residents discovered a cache of clay tablets. These tablets, inscribed in Akkadian cuneiform, proved to be diplomatic correspondence from the 14th century BCE. The letters were written to the Egyptian pharaohs Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten by various rulers throughout the Near East. Many came from Canaanite city-states, Jerusalem, Gezer, Megiddo, Hazor, and others. These letters provide a vivid picture of Canaan in the late Bronze Age, just before the presumed Israelite emergence. The land was divided into numerous small city-states, nominally under Egyptian control but constantly feuding with each other. The letters mention a group called the Habaru, sometimes written as Apiru. Some scholars have wondered if this term might be related to Hebrew, though this connection remains highly disputed. The Habaru appear to be displaced peoples or raiders operating on the margins of settled society. In 2015, Dr. Nadav Naaman published a comprehensive study of the geopolitical situation reflected in the Amarna letters, showing how this period of Egyptian weakness allowed local rulers unusual autonomy. The Amarna letters close our third act by transporting us to the late Bronze Age Canaan, a world of small kingdoms and big ambitions, of international diplomacy conducted in clay and cuneiform. This was the world that existed just before the biblical narrative of Israelite settlement begins. We have explored the kingdoms and their conflicts, the archaeological evidence for biblical kings, the debates that continue among scholars. Now let us turn to something perhaps less dramatic but equally fascinating. Let us examine the administrative systems, the writing practices, the bureaucratic machinery that kept these ancient kingdoms functioning day by day. Chapter 4. To administer, to write, to govern. Behind every kingdom, there exists an administrative apparatus. Scribes who record transactions. Officials who collect taxes. Seals that authenticate documents. Weights that ensure fair trade. These mundane objects of bureaucracy may lack the glamour of royal inscriptions or temple architecture. Yet they tell us something profound about ancient society. They reveal systems of organization, networks of authority, the everyday mechanisms by which power operated. In this fourth chapter, we examine 10 discoveries related to administration and governance in the biblical kingdoms. Part 31. Royal Seals of Judah. Throughout ancient Judah and Israel, important documents were sealed with clay bully. A string would be wrapped around a papyrus document, then a lump of clay pressed over the knot. While the string was still embedded in the clay, a seal would be stamped into it, leaving an impression. Hundreds of these seal impressions have been found in archaeological excavations. They often bear the name of an official and sometimes his title. Belonging to Gedaliah, who is over the house, belonging to Azariah, servant of the king. Many of these names appear in the biblical text. The Bible mentions numerous royal officials, scribes, and administrators. While we cannot always be certain that a seal belongs to the specific individual mentioned in the Bible, the correspondence of names and titles is often striking. In 2018, Dr. Joseph Garfinkel published a comprehensive study cataloging over 500 Hebrew seals and seal impressions from the Iron Age. His work traced the evolution of seal designs, showing how decorative motifs changed over time. Earlier seals often featured scarabs or Egyptian-influenced designs. Later seals became more abstract, avoiding representational art, possibly reflecting stricter interpretation of the biblical prohibition against graven images. These royal seals provide a window into the administrative bureaucracy of ancient Judah. They testify to a literate official class, to systems of record-keeping, to the everyday functioning of government. Behind the dramatic biblical narratives of kings and prophets, there were scribes quietly stamping clay. Part 32. A royal seal from Judah, Yediahu. In 2015, during excavations in the city of David in Jerusalem, archaeologist Dr. Eilat Mazar's team discovered a small clay seal impression. The impression bore an inscription, belonging to Yediahu, son of the king. The title Son of the King was an official designation in ancient Judah. It didn't necessarily mean the person was literally a son of the reigning monarch. Rather, it indicated a high-ranking official, perhaps a royal administrator or governor. The seal was found in a layer dating to the late 7th or early 6th century BCE, during the final decades of the Judean kingdom before the Babylonian conquest. Interestingly, no individual named Yediahu appears in the biblical texts from this period. This reminds us that the Bible preserves only a fraction of the names of officials who served in the Judean bureaucracy. For every person mentioned in the biblical text, there were many others whose names are lost to us, known now only through archaeology. This seal of Yediahu represents countless anonymous officials who kept the kingdom functioning. They managed properties, collected taxes, adjudicated disputes, maintained records. The biblical narrative focuses on kings and prophets, but these administrators formed the backbone of the state. Part 33. The Seal of Shema, servant of Jeroboam. Among the most famous ancient Hebrew seals is one bearing the inscription, belonging to Shema, servant of Jeroboam, accompanied by a roaring lion. Discovered in the early 20th century at Megiddo, the seal probably dates to the 8th century BCE, likely referring to Jeroboam II, a powerful king of Israel. The lion motif is particularly striking, a symbol of royal power, beautifully carved with remarkable artistic skill. The title Servant of the King, Ebed Hamelech, was a high official designation. Shema was probably a senior administrator or governor. The Shema seal demonstrates that even in the northern kingdom of Israel, which the Bible portrays as more religiously wayward, there existed sophisticated bureaucracy and skilled artisans. Part 34. Yehud seal and the Persian province. After the Babylonian exile, when Persians allowed Jews to return, Judah became a province called Yehud. Numerous seals bear this name. These Yehud seals, dating to the 5th to 4th centuries BCE, often include the province name along with an official's name. They testify to Persian administrative organization. Some Yehud seals feature imagery, lions, birds, floral motifs. These designs reflect Persian artistic influence while maintaining local traditions. In 2014, Dr. Oded Lipschitz published a comprehensive study of Yehud seals, analyzing their distribution and what they reveal about administrative geography. Yehud seals mark a transition period when the Jewish community was reorganizing under foreign rule, maintaining identity while adapting to new political realities. Part 35. The Seal of Gedalia. Several seals bearing the name Gedalia have been found, with one particularly significant, belonging to Gedalia, who was over the house. The title over the house, al-Habayit, was a high administrative position, essentially chief minister or palace administrator. The Bible mentions a Gedalia appointed by the Babylonians as governor of Judah after Jerusalem's destruction in 586 BCE. He was later assassinated. While we can't definitively link the seal to the biblical Gedalia, the title and time period match. The seal was found at Lachish in a destruction layer from the Babylonian conquest. The Gedalia seal offers a possible connection to a specific tragic moment in biblical history, when Judah's last remnant of autonomy was extinguished. Part 36. Clay bully from Gezer. At Gezer, that ancient city we've already encountered, archaeologists discovered numerous clay bulla seal impressions that once secured papyrus documents. These bullae, dating to the Iron Age II period, 8th to 6th centuries BCE, bear various names and titles, providing a snapshot of local administration. Some bullae show two seal impressions suggesting documents requiring authorization from multiple officials, a kind of ancient co-signing system. The documents themselves, being papyrus, have long since decomposed. Only the clay bullae survive, like fossils of ancient bureaucracy. The Gezer bullae remind us of how much has been lost. For every seal impression we find, there was once a complete document, a contract, a letter, an administrative record, now vanished. Part 37. The Bully of Baruch. One of the most intriguing seal discoveries is a bulla bearing the name, belonging to Berechiah son of Neriah the scribe. The biblical book of Jeremiah prominently features Baruch, a shortened form of Berechiah, son of Neriah, who served as Jeremiah's scribe and secretary. The seal appeared on the antiquities market in the 1970s with no clear archaeological provenance, raising questions about authenticity. In 1996, paleographer Naaman Abagad published analysis suggesting it was genuine. However, without controlled excavation context, certainty remains elusive. The Baruch bulla exemplifies archaeology's challenges. Even if authentic, we can't be absolutely certain it belonged to the biblical Baruch, though the match is tantalizing. Part 38. The ostraca of Samaria. Ostraca are pottery shards used as writing surface ancient scratch paper. At Samaria, capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, dozens were discovered. Dating to the 8th century BCE, probably King Jeroboam II's reign, these Samaria ostraca record wine and oil shipments sent to the royal palace. They mention place names, personal names, quantities of goods. They're essentially tax receipts or administrative records. The personal names are fascinating. Many incorporate the divine name YHWH, showing that even in the Northern Kingdom, YHWH worship remained important. The Samaria Ostraca provide rare direct evidence of Northern Kingdom administration, showing that Israel had sophisticated systems for collecting and recording agricultural production. Part 39. The Ostraca of Elephantine. Far from Judah, on Elephantine Island in the Nile River in southern Egypt, a Jewish military garrison existed during the Persian period, 5th century BCE. Archaeologists discovered numerous papyri and ostraca written in Aramaic by this Jewish community, revealing a fascinating diaspora existence. The documents include letters, legal contracts, marriage documents, and most surprising references to a temple to YHWH at Elephantine, complete with sacrifices. This contradicts the biblical ideal of centralized worship in Jerusalem. Yet here were Jews maintaining their own temple in Egypt. The Elephantine papyri show that ancient Judaism was more diverse than we often imagine, with diaspora communities developing their own practices. Part 40. Stone weights from Jerusalem. Archaeologists have found numerous stone weights in ancient Jerusalem and other Israelite sites, carefully shaped and sometimes inscribed with their value. The biblical book of Proverbs repeatedly condemns dishonest weights. The Lord detests differing weights. These archaeological finds give concrete reality to this concern. The weights follow a system based on the shekel, about 11.4 grams. Multiple weights have been found: half shekel, quarter shekel, and larger units. Some weights show signs of tampering filed down to reduce their mass, allowing dishonest merchants to cheat customers. The very fraud the Bible condemned. In 2019, a study by Dr. Haggai Misgab analyzed weight distribution and standardization, showing efforts at regulation but also persistent cheating. These humble stone weights close our fourth act by reminding us that biblical ethics addressed real, daily concern: fair trade, honest dealing, economic justice. The ancient world was not so different from ours. Chapter 5. Jerusalem and the time of Jesus. We now approach the places where, according to the Gospels, Jesus walked. Jerusalem in the 1st century. The pools where people came for healing. The synagogues where he taught. Part 41. The garden at Golgotha confirmed by botanical analysis. The Gospel of John mentions that Jesus was crucified at Golgotha, and nearby there was a garden with a new tomb. In 2016, Dr. Simcha Leviatin, a botanist from University of Haifa Oranim, analyzed fossilized pollen and seeds from the Holy Sepulchre area, in soil layers dating to the 1st century. Analysis revealed cultivated plants, olive trees, fig trees, grapevines, precisely what you would expect in a 1st century Jewish garden. In 2019, geologist Dr. Amos Frumkin confirmed this location was outside city walls in the 1st century, as the Gospels describe, in an area used for gardens and burial. These scientific studies confirm the site matches Gospel descriptions: a garden area outside the city walls, suitable for both horticulture and burial. Part 42. New excavations at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre has been rebuilt many times. In 2016 to 2017, a major restoration project allowed unprecedented access to the tomb edicule. Led by Professor Antonia Morapula from National Technical University of Athens, they found a limestone burial shelf beneath later additions typical of 1st century Jewish tombs. Mortar analysis showed parts date to the Roman period. Radiocarbon dating return dates around 345 CE, when Emperor Constantine built the first church here. Even more intriguing, Greek graffiti found on walls beneath the church appear to date to the 2nd or 3rd century, suggesting Christians venerated this location before Constantine. The excavations reveal layers of devotion spanning nearly 2,000 years. Whether or not this is the actual tomb, it has been revered as such since earliest Christianity. Part 43. Dating the Crucifixion. The Gospels provide chronological clues about when Jesus was crucified, but not a precise date in our modern calendar. In 2011, Colin Humphreys and Graham Waddington, researchers at Cambridge, proposed April 3, 33 CE as most likely, based on astronomical calculations combined with historical and biblical data. The Gospels state the crucifixion occurred around Passover, which follows the lunar calendar. By calculating which years during Pilate governorship had Passover on Friday, they narrowed possibilities. Other scholars propose different dates, 30, 31, or 32 CE. In 2018, Dr. Helen Bond published research refining our understanding of Pilate governorship, 26 to 36 CE. These scholarly attempts show how archaeology, astronomy, and textual analysis work together. We may never know the exact date, but can establish a reasonable time frame. Part 44. Rolling stone tombs, a rare luxury. The Gospels describe Jesus being buried in a tomb sealed with a large rolling stone. This detail tells us something significant. In 2013, Dr. Amos Kloner surveyed over 900 burial caves in Jerusalem area from the Second Temple period. Only 4 had large rolling stones as described in the Gospels. Most tombs were sealed with smaller stones. Tombs with large, wheel-shaped stones rolling in a channel were extremely rare and expensive to construct. This archaeological detail confirms the Gospel account that the tomb belonged to Joseph of Arimathea, described as a wealthy man. Only the very wealthy could afford such tombs. In 2015, archaeologists Boaz Zissou and team discovered another rolling stone tomb at Akeldama, near Jerusalem. The stone was so large it would have required multiple men to move. The rarity of rolling stone tombs adds credibility to Gospel accounts. This was not common practice, it was a distinctive feature Gospel writers remembered and recorded. Part 45. The Pool of Bethesda. The Gospel of John describes Jesus healing a paralyzed man at the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, providing specific architectural details. The pool had 5 porticos. For years this puzzled scholars. How could a pool have 5 porticos? Skeptics suggested John invented or misremembered details. Then excavations near the Church of St. and revealed an ancient pool complex. Archaeologists Joachim Jeremias and the White Fathers conducted extensive work. They discovered the pool was actually 2 pools, side by side, separated by a central wall. This created a unique configuration, 4 porticos around outer edges, plus 1 running along the central dividing wall. Exactly 5 porticos. In 2017, Dr. Shimon Gibson published research showing its sophisticated hydraulic system. The pool was fed by underground springs and served for ritual bathing with a reputation for healing properties. The Pool of Bethesda demonstrates how archaeology can vindicate seemingly odd details. What appeared to be error turned out to be accurate description of unique architecture. Part 46. The Magdala Synagogue in Menorah Stone. In 2009, workers preparing to build a hotel near the Sea of Galilee accidentally discovered ancient ruin, a complete 1st century synagogue at Magdala, home of Mary Magdalene. Archaeologists Dina Avshalom Gorny and Arfan Najjar directed excavations. The synagogue dates to before 70 CE, making it one of the oldest ever discovered. Inside, they found a carved stone block, now called the Magdala stone, featuring elaborate decorations including the earliest known depiction of a 7-branched menorah from the Second Temple period. The stone was clearly carved by someone who had seen the actual menorah in the Jerusalem temple. The proportions and details are precise, suggesting the carver visited the temple and created this image from memory. In 2016, Dr. Richard Bauckham published a study of the stone iconography, arguing the symbols reflect 1st century Galilean piety centered on the Jerusalem temple. The Magdala Synagogue is particularly significant because Jesus almost certainly would have visited it during his Galilee ministry. The Gospels mention him teaching in synagogues around the Sea of Galilee. Part 47. The restored Capernaum Synagogue. Capernaum, described in the Gospels as Jesus' base of operations during his Galilean ministry, features prominently in the New Testament. The impressive white limestone synagogue visible today dates to the 4th to 5th century CE. However, excavations beneath it revealed an earlier structure from the 1st century. Franciscan archaeologists who excavated the site found that the later synagogue was built directly over the earlier one, preserving its sacred location. The 1st century structure, made of black basalt, was much simpler. This would have been the synagogue Jesus actually visited and taught in. The Capernaum Synagogue shows how early Christians preserved memory of places associated with Jesus, building new structures over old ones to honor sacred locations. Part 48. The family tomb of Caiaphas? In 1990, construction workers in Jerusalem accidentally uncovered a burial cave containing several ossuary stone boxes used to hold bones after decomposition. One ornate ossuary bore the inscription Yehoseph bar Kaf, Joseph son of Caiaphas. The Gospels mention Caiaphas as the high priest who presided over Jesus' trial. Inside the ossuary were the bones of a 60-year-old man, along with bones of other family members. The ossuary dates to the 1st century CE. While we cannot be absolutely certain this is the biblical Caiaphas, the match is compelling. Right name, right title, right time period, right location. The possible Caiaphas ossuary provides a tangible connection to gospel narrative, a reminder that these were real people in a real historical context. Part 49. Ship graffiti of Peter at Bethsaida. Bethsaida, on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip according to the Gospels. Excavations at Et Tel, identified as ancient Bethsaida, have been ongoing since the 1980s under the direction of Dr. Ramirov. Among the finds, numerous fishing implements and, intriguingly, graffiti of boats scratched into walls and pottery. These simple drawings testify to a fishing community. The boat designs match the type of fishing vessels used on the Sea of Galilee in the 1st century, the very kind Peter would have used. These humble graffiti connect us to the daily life of 1st century fishermen who became Jesus' first disciples. Part 50. The Necropolis of Colossae. Colossae, recipient of Paul's epistle to the Colossians, was a city in ancient Phrygia, in what is now Turkey. While the city itself has been little excavated, surveys of the necropoli, the burial ground, have revealed hundreds of tombs from the Roman period. Some tombs contain inscriptions mentioning occupations, family relationships, even religious affiliations. A few may indicate Christian burials from the earliest centuries. In 2019, a comprehensive survey of the Colossae necropolis was published by Turkish archaeologists, documenting the burial practices of this early Christian community. The Colossae necropolis closes our 5th chapter by reminding us that Paul's letters were addressed to real community people who lived, died, were buried, and whose memory archaeology continues to uncover. Chapter 6. Manuscripts, Texts, and Transmission. The Bible did not arrive as a printed book. It began as scrolls, carefully copied by hand, generation after generation. Many ancient manuscripts have been lost, but some survived. Part 51. A long Greek papyrus from the Judean desert. In 2021, the Israel Antiquities Authority announced an extraordinary discovery. Their teams had been conducting systematic surveys of Judean desert caves, racing against looters. In the Cave of Horror, so named because skeletons from the Bar Kokhba revolt were found there in the 1960s, they discovered fragments of a Greek papyrus scroll containing passages from the minor prophets, Zechariah and Nahum. Analyzed by scholars Oren Abelman, Asaf Geyer, and S.D. Eshel, the papyrus dates to the late 1st or early 2nd century CE, among the oldest witnesses to the Greek Septuagint translation. The scroll was hidden during the Bar Kokhba revolt, between 132 and 136 CE. Jewish refugees fleeing Roman forces brought their sacred texts into these remote desert caves. This Greek papyrus reminds us ancient Judaism was multilingual. Many Jews spoke Greek rather than Hebrew, needing Greek translations of scriptures. Part 52. New manuscript discoveries in the desert. Between 2017 and 2021, the Israel Antiquities Authority launched a massive project, the Judean Desert Survey, to systematically explore every accessible cave before looters could reach them. Directed by Amir Ganner and Hanania Hizmi, teams rappelled down cliffs, crawled through narrow passages, worked in extreme heat. The conditions were challenging, often dangerous. The survey explored hundreds of caves. Along with manuscript fragments, they found coins from Bar Kokhba revolt, Roman arrowheads, even a complete 10,500-year-old woven basket, one of the world's oldest. Most significantly, they recovered dozens of manuscript fragments previously unnoticed. These fragments are now being studied, photographed, made available to scholars worldwide. The Judean Desert Survey shows that even in the 21st century, archaeological work often requires physical courage and endurance. Part 53. The Zechariah and Nahum fragments. Let us look more closely at those Greek papyrus fragments of Zechariah and Nahum. The text itself holds fascinating features. The Greek translation is remarkably close to the Septuagint version we know from much later manuscripts, suggesting the Septuagint text was already relatively stable by the 1st or 2nd century. But something unusual, when the divine name, the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, appears, it is not written in Greek letters. Instead, it is written in Paleo-Hebrew script, an archaic form of Hebrew that had fallen out of common use centuries earlier. This shows that even Greek-speaking Jews maintained the tradition that God's name was too sacred to translate or pronounce. They copied it in ancient Hebrew letters within their Greek text as a mark of reverence. In 2022, Dr. Kip Davis analyzed the scribal hand, noting the professional quality of the writing. This was copied by a trained scribe, probably in an organized scriptorium. These fragments teach us about ancient scribal practices, about linguistic diversity in Judaism, about reverence for sacred texts. Part 54. No new major scrolls announced. It is important to note what has not been found. Despite extensive surveys and excavations, no major new Dead Sea Scrolls complete or nearly complete scrolls have been discovered in recent decades. The fragments found in the 2021 survey, while significant, are relatively small. They do not represent new complete books or previously unknown texts. This reminds us that archaeological discovery is unpredictable. Sometimes we find more than expected. Sometimes less. The dramatic 1947 discoveries at Qumran remain unique. The absence of major new scrolls keeps the original Dead Sea Scrolls discoveries in perspective. They were extraordinary finds that transformed biblical scholarship. Part 55. Recent research on Judean desert manuscripts. While no major new scrolls have been found, research on existing manuscripts continues intensively. New imaging technologies, DNA analysis of parchment, advanced dating methods all provide fresh insights. In 2020, research by Dr. Nina Shore and team used multispectral imaging to reveal previously illegible text on damaged fragments. DNA analysis of parchment has helped determine which fragments came from the same animal hide, allowing scholars to reconstruct which pieces belong together. Radiocarbon dating has refined chronologies, confirming that many Dead Sea Scrolls date to the last centuries BCE and 1st century CE. This ongoing research demonstrates that archaeology is not just about discovering new objects, but also about applying new methods to old finds. Part 56. Publications, Discoveries in the Judean Desert. The authoritative publication series for Dead Sea Scrolls is Discoveries in the Judean Desert, published by Oxford University Press. This massive series, begun in 1955 and completed in 2009, runs to 40 volumes. It provides photographs, transcriptions, and scholarly commentary on the scrolls. The series represents decades of painstaking work by international teams of scholars. Each fragment was photographed, transcribed, analyzed, translated. Since completion of the main series, supplementary volumes continue to appear as new research emerges or previously unpublished fragments are analyzed. Discoveries in the Judean Desert stands as a monument to scholarly collaboration and dedication to making ancient texts available to all. Part 57. The Isaiah Scroll split in two. The Great Isaiah Scroll, one of the most complete manuscripts from Qumran, contains the entire book of Isaiah. Dating to around 125 BCE, it is remarkably well preserved. For conservation purposes, the scroll is now kept in two separate sections at the Israel Museum. This allows better preservation and easier access for study. The scroll shows evidence of multiple scribes working on it, corrections, annotations giving us insight into ancient scribal practices. Comparison with the Masoretic text. The standard Hebrew Bible text shows the Isaiah scroll is remarkably similar, with only minor variations. This demonstrates the stability of biblical text transmission. The Isaiah scroll, though now split for practical reasons, remains one of our most valuable witnesses to the ancient biblical text. Part 58. Enoch, the AI of Dead Sea Scrolls. In recent years, artificial intelligence has been applied to Dead Sea Scrolls research. A project called Enoch uses machine learning to help reconstruct damaged manuscripts. The AI is trained on known scroll fragments, learning to recognize letter forms, scribal hands, and text patterns. It can then suggest likely readings for damaged or unclear sections. In 2021, research by Dr. Mladen Popovic and team demonstrated AI could predict missing text with surprising accuracy, based on linguistic patterns and paleographic analysis. However, scholars emphasize that AI is a tool to assist human judgment, not replace it. Final decisions about readings still require expert knowledge. The Enoch project represents the meeting of ancient texts and cutting-edge technology, showing how modern tools can help unlock ancient mysteries. Part 59. Dead Sea Graffiti. Not all ancient writing was formal scripture. In the Qumran caves and surrounding areas, archaeologists have found numerous graffiti and formal inscriptions scratched into walls and rocks. Some graffiti are simply names people marking their presence. Others are short prayers or blessings. Some appear to be practice writing by students. In 2018, a study by Dr. Randall Price analyzed graffiti patterns, noting that some inscriptions may have been left by Qumran community members, others by later visitors. These humble scratchings provide a more personal, informal view of ancient life compared to carefully prepared scrolls. Dead Sea graffiti remind us that not all ancient communication was sacred or formal. People have always felt the urge to leave their mark. Part 60. Apocalyptic graffiti from the Cave of Horror. In the Cave of Horror, alongside the papyrus fragments, archaeologists found graffiti scratched into the cave walls. Some inscriptions appear to be apocalyptic in nature, referencing end times, divine judgment, deliverance. They were likely written by the Jewish refugees hiding in the cave during the Bar Kokhba revolt. These people were facing Roman legions, fleeing for their lives, knowing their cause was probably doomed. Yet they took time to write prayers and apocalyptic hopes on cave walls. The graffiti are fragmentary, difficult to read. But their presence speaks to the enduring human need to express faith, even or especially in darkest moments. The apocalyptic graffiti of the Cave of Horror close our sixth act with a poignant reminder: biblical texts were not just abstract theology. They were living faith that sustained people through unimaginable trials. Chapter 7. Wars, Empires, and Cataclysms. The biblical world was never peaceful. It was a crossroads of civilizations, a battlefield where the mightiest empires clashed. Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans each left their mark. Part 61. An Assyrian military base near Jerusalem. In 701 BCE, Assyrian king Sennacherib invaded Judah. The Bible describes how his army besieged Jerusalem, how King Hezekiah prayed, how the Assyrian camp was struck by plague, forcing Sennacherib to withdraw. In 2018 to 2019, excavations at Khirbet Aras, just 5 kilometers southwest of Jerusalem, directed by Professor Joseph Garfinkel, discovered what appears to be an Assyrian military base. The site revealed a rectangular fortified enclosure, typical of Assyrian military camps, dating precisely to late 8th century BCE. Inside, hundreds of Assyrian-style pottery shards, arrowheads, fortification remnants. The strategic position controls roads leading from the south toward Jerusalem. This was probably a rear base for the Assyrian army during the siege. In 2020, radiocarbon analysis confirmed the dating. The base was occupied very briefly, perhaps weeks or months, then abandoned, corresponding exactly to the biblical account of a lightning campaign that ended abruptly. The Assyrian military base takes us back to that terrifying moment when Judah's survival hung by a thread. The Assyrians were at the gates. What happened? Why did they withdraw? Archaeology confirms the withdrawal, but the reason remains mysterious. Part 62. The Assyrian Tribute Inscription. The Assyrians did not merely conquer. They humiliated, terrorized, documented their victories with almost modern bureaucratic precision. In Sennacherib Annals, discovered at Nineveh and now in the British Museum, we can read the Assyrian account of the 701 campaign. As for Hezekiah the Judean, who did not submit to my yoke, I besieged 46 of his fortified cities. I brought out 200,150 people. As for him, I confined him in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. The inscription continues, enumerating tribute Hezekiah was forced to pay: 30 talents of gold, 800 talents of silver, precious stones, ivory furniture, slaves. This list corresponds almost exactly to 2 Kings 18 verses 14 to 16. What is fascinating, Sennacherib does not claim to have conquered Jerusalem. He says he besieged it, received tribute, but not that he captured it. A remarkable omission for an Assyrian king who normally boasted of every victory with gory detail. In 2019, a new translation by Dr. Eckhart from Yale confirmed that something unusual occurred. Sennacherib deliberately avoided mentioning the final outcome, a silence that speaks volumes. The Assyrian tribute inscription offers valuable external testimony. Bible and Assyrian annals converge on essential facts: campaign, siege, tribute paid. But on the crucial question, why was Jerusalem not destroyed? Both sources remain enigmatically silent. Part 63. A giant lamassu of Esarhaddon. To understand the terror the Assyrians inspired, one must see their monuments. In 2018, excavations at Tel Hadid in Israel, directed by Nir Shimshon Paran, discovered a fragment of a lamassu. Lamassus were those colossal creatures, half bull half human, that guarded gates of Assyrian palaces. Standing several meters high, carved in stone with intimidating precision, they symbolized the invincible power of the empire. The fragment comes from a lamassu commissioned by Esarhaddon, son of Sennacherib, who reigned 681 to 669 BCE. The cuneiform inscription explicitly mentions Esarhaddon as king of Assyria, king of kings. What was an Assyrian lamassu doing in Israel? Probably it adorned a palace or administrative building during Assyrian occupation. Tel Hadid sat on the important coastal road linking Egypt to Mesopotamia. The statue was deliberately broken, perhaps during a revolt, perhaps when the Assyrians withdrew. In 2020, petrographic study by Dr. Yuval Gorin showed the basalt came from northern Syria, confirming it was carved in Assyria and transported hundreds of kilometers. The giant Lamassu reminds us that Assyrian occupation was not just temporary military presence. The Assyrians built, settled, imposed their art, architecture, ideology. To see such a colossus on Israel land must have been overwhelming, a daily reminder of forced submission. Part 64. The Assyrian fort at Tel Gemma. Tel Gemma, located in the Negev near Gaza, reveals another aspect of Assyrian domination: systematic fortification of conquered territory. Excavations since the 1970s, first by Gus van Beek of the Smithsonian and later by other teams, revealed an impressive Assyrian fort dating to the 7th century BCE. The fort displayed all characteristics of Assyrian military architecture: thick mud brick walls, central courtyard, storage magazines, stables. Hundreds of Assyrian-style pottery shards littered the site, along with cuneiform administrative tablets. One tablet, published in 2015 by Dr. Wayne Horowitz of Hebrew University, records grain rations distributed to soldiers and Assyrian officials. It mentions Akkadian, Aramaic, and even a few Hebrew names, probably local collaborators. Tel Gemma occupied a strategic position, controlling Negev routes and serving as a rear base for Assyrian campaigns toward Egypt. One link in a vast network of fortifications. The Assyrian fort testifies to imperial methodology. Conquest was not enough, they had to occupy, administer, exploit. The Assyrians were the first to create a true territorial empire with its bureaucracy, garrisons, taxation system. Part 65. The Mines of Timnah and Edom. Let us leave battlefields and descend into the earth itself. To the copper mines of Timnah, in the Arava Desert in southern Israel. These mines, exploited since the Bronze Age, were particularly active during the kingdom of Edom. Those Edomites the Bible presents as descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother, and recurring enemies of Israel. Archaeologists debated Edom chronology. Dr. Thomas Levy of UC San Diego argued Edom was an organized kingdom as early as the 10th century BCE. Israel Finkelstein maintained Edom only became structured in the 7th century. Between 2013 and 2019, intensive excavations by Levy at Timnah revealed sophisticated mining activity dating to the 10th century, exactly the era of David and Solomon. Radiocarbon dating of organic remains in copper slag confirmed these dates. Even more fascinating, hundreds of beautifully preserved textile fragments, protected by arid climate, the oldest textiles ever found in Israel. Analysis revealed sophisticated dyeing and weaving techniques, testifying to a complex society. The Timnah mines remind us that power in antiquity rested as much on control of resources as on military force. Copper was the oil of the ancient world. Whoever controlled the mines controlled wealth. Biblical conflicts between Israel and Edom were wars over resources. Part 66. Goat bones from Sinai and the Exodus. The Exodus, the departure of Israelites from Egypt, the crossing of the Red Sea, the wandering in the desert, is one of the Bible's most dramatic narratives. But can archaeology confirm it? The answer is complex. No direct archaeological evidence of the Exodus has been found. No inscriptions mention Israelite slaves in Egypt. No physical traces of a large group wandering in Sinai for 40 years. However, some intriguing indirect evidence exists. Archaeologists studying Sinai nomadic sites have found goat bones dating to the Late Bronze Age, the presumed Exodus period. These bones show evidence of pastoral nomadic lifestyle, seasonal movements, small temporary camps, herding practices. This matches the biblical description of a wandering pastoral people. In 2017, Dr. Uzi Abner published a study of Sinai archaeology, arguing that while we cannot prove the Exodus happened as described, the Sinai environment in the Late Bronze Age would have supported such a movement. The goat bones from Sinai do not prove the Exodus. But they show that the biblical narrative describes a plausible lifestyle in a plausible setting. Absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Part 67. Early domesticated camels. The Bible frequently mentions camels in the patriarchal narratives. Abraham's servants have camels. Isaac's servants water camels at Rebekah well. Jacob flees with camels. For years, archaeologists argued these references were anachronistic. They claimed camels were not domesticated in the Levant until around 1000 BCE, centuries after the patriarchal period. In 2014, Dr. Erez Ben Yosef and Lidar Sapirhan published findings from copper mines in the Arava Valley, confirming camels were not widely used there until the 10th century BCE. However, more recent research has found earlier evidence. In 2016, bones identified as domesticated camels were found at sites in Arabia dating to 1800 BCE. Trade routes using camels may have existed earlier than previously thought. The camel debate illustrates how archaeological understanding evolves. What once seemed like clear anachronism now appears more nuanced. The absence of widespread camel use does not preclude limited earlier use along trade routes. Part 68. The Thera eruption redated. The volcanic eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, was one of the largest in human history. It devastated the Minoan civilization and may have influenced the ancient Near East. Some scholars have speculated it might relate to the biblical plagues of Egypt. The darkness, the hail, the turning of water to blood could reflect volcanic effects. For years, the eruption was dated to around 1500 BCE. However, radiocarbon dating of olive branches buried in volcanic ash, published in 2006, suggested a date around 1628 BCE. This created a controversy. The radiocarbon dates conflicted with archaeological dating based on Egyptian pottery found at Thera. In 2018, new analysis attempted to reconcile the dates, proposing 1560 to 1550 BCE as a compromise. The Thera eruption redating affects our understanding of the entire Eastern Mediterranean in the Late Bronze Age. If the eruption was earlier than thought, it changes chronologies across the region, including possible connections to biblical events. Part 69. The Tomb of Thutmose II. Identifying the pharaoh of the Exodus has been a long-standing question. Traditional interpretations often pointed to Ramesses II, but chronological difficulties led some scholars to propose earlier pharaohs. Thutmose II, who ruled around 1493–1479 BCE, has been suggested as a candidate. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings was discovered in 1898 by Victor Loret. The tomb was found in poor condition, extensively looted. However, Thutmose II mummy was discovered in the royal mummy cache at Deir el-Bahari in 1881. Examination of the mummy shows he died relatively young, possibly in his early 30s. Some have speculated this could fit a pharaoh who died during the Exodus plagues, though this remains highly speculative. The tomb of Thutmose II reminds us that archaeology alone cannot definitively identify the Exodus pharaoh if indeed the Exodus occurred as a single historical event. The biblical narrative may reflect a more complex historical process. Part 70. Biblical-era Mediterranean shipwrecks. The Mediterranean was the highway of the ancient world. Phoenician, Greek, and Roman ships carried goods, ideas, and people across its waters. Underwater archaeology has revealed numerous shipwrecks from biblical periods. In 2016, Dr. Sean Kingsley published a comprehensive survey of Iron Age shipwrecks in the Eastern Mediterranean. These wrecks carried cargoes of wine amphorae, olive oil jars, timber, metals, grain. They show the extensive trade networks connecting the Levant to Cyprus, Greece, North Africa, Italy. One particularly significant wreck, found off the coast of Ashkelon, contained Phoenician goods dating to the 8th century BCE. The cargo included luxury items, carved ivories, fine pottery, precious metals. These shipwrecks remind us that the biblical world was not isolated or provincial. It was part of a vast maritime network. When the Bible mentions merchant ships, Phoenician traders, or goods from Tarshish, it reflects real economic activity. Mediterranean shipwrecks close our seventh act by showing that alongside the wars and empires, there was also peaceful commerce, cultural exchange, the everyday business of moving goods and people across the ancient world. Chapter 8. Neighboring lands, memories, and legacies. Beyond the Jordan, south into the desert, north into Phoenicia, west across the sea. The biblical world was surrounded by rich, complex, fascinating civilizations. Part 71. Tal Adh Dahab al-Garbi in ancient Mahanaim. Let us cross the Jordan eastward, toward present-day Jordan, to explore biblical sites less known but equally fascinating. Tal Adh Dahab al-Garbi, in the Jordan Valley of Jordan, is identified by several scholars as ancient Mahanaim, a site mentioned in the Bible, notably as King David's place of refuge when fleeing his son Absalom. Excavations since 2013 by a Jordanian-American team directed by Dr. Adnan Hadidi revealed continuous occupation from Middle Bronze Age through the Persian period, with activity peaking in Iron II, the era of the united and divided monarchy. The remains include impressive fortification walls from different periods, public buildings, and notably, a sophisticated water system carved through bedrock. This infrastructure testifies to a well-organized city capable of hosting the royal court in exile. In 2019, discovery of a seal bearing a Hebrew name reinforced the site identification as an Israelite or Judean administrative center. While identification with Mahanaim remains debated, the concordance between topography, chronology, and function is striking. Tal Adh Dahab al-Garbi reminds us that Transjordan was integral to the biblical world. The tribes of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh settled east of the Jordan. It was there David found refuge. These lands, now in Jordan, still bear memory of Israel. Part 72. Tal Adh Dahab esh-Sharqi and ancient Peniel. Not far from Mahanaim lies Tal Adh Dahab esh-Sharqi, identified as ancient Peniel, the place where Jacob wrestled with the angel and received the name Israel. This Genesis narrative, one of the Bible's most mysterious, would have unfolded here, beside the Jabbok stream, in this valley enclosed by Gilead Hills. Excavations at Peniel, conducted since the 1960s and resumed in the 21st century, revealed a fortified city dating mainly to Iron II. The site was apparently destroyed and rebuilt several times, testifying to conflicts that agitated the region. The Book of Kings recounts that Jeroboam, first king of the northern kingdom after the division, fortified Peniel. Archaeological remains confirm that a major fortification phase occurred in the 10th century, corresponding to this era. In 2017, a detailed topographical study by Dr. Burton MacDonald of St. Francis Xavier University showed that Peniel controlled an important fort across the Jabbok, explaining its strategic importance and perhaps also why Jacob had to wrestle symbolically to obtain right of passage. Tal Adh Dahab esh-Sharqi, biblical Peniel, brings us back to the very origin of the name Israel. It was here, according to Genesis, that Jacob became Israel, he who struggles with God. Archaeology cannot explain the theophany, but it can bring us back to the place. Part 73. Bethany beyond the Jordan. Let us remain in Transjordan to visit one of the most important Christian sites, Bethany beyond the Jordan, traditional location of Jesus' baptism. The site, called Al-Matas in Arabic, is located on the Jordan River eastern bank, in Jordan. The Gospel of John mentions that John the Baptist was baptizing at Bethany beyond the Jordan, and it was there Jesus came to be baptized. Systematic excavations since 1996 by Dr. Muhammad Wahib of Jordan Department of Antiquities revealed a remarkable religious complex, superimposed Byzantine churches, baptismal pools, hermit caves, monastery remains. The site was a continuous Christian pilgrimage destination from earliest centuries. Mosaics, inscriptions, pilgrims' graffiti testify to its uninterrupted veneration. In 2015, the site was inscribed on UNESCO World Heritage List. In 2000, during a historic visit, Pope John Paul II came on pilgrimage to Al-Matas, officially recognizing the site as the authentic location of the baptism. His visit renewed archaeological and touristic interest. Bethany beyond the Jordan reminds us that Christian faith was born on both banks of the river. Jesus himself constantly crossed the Jordan, moving between Galilee, Judea, and Transjordan. These modern borders did not exist. Part 74. Mount Nebo and Khirbet al-Muqayyat. Mount Nebo, in Jordan, is where, according to Deuteronomy, Moses viewed the Promised Land before his death. From its summit, one can see the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea, and on clear days, Jerusalem. Excavations at Mount Nebo, conducted since the 1930s by the Franciscan Archaeological Institute, revealed a Byzantine monastery complex built to commemorate Moses. Nearby, at Khirbet al-Muqayyat, ancient Nebo, beautiful Byzantine mosaics were discovered in churches, depicting biblical scenes, animals, hunting, daily life. These 6th century mosaics are remarkably well preserved. The mosaics show how Byzantine Christians in Transjordan commemorated biblical events, creating sacred geography by building churches at traditional holy sites. Mount Nebo and Khirbet al-Muqayyat close the Moses story archaeologically, showing how, even if we cannot verify the biblical account, early Christians and Jews preserved memory of these locations across centuries. Part 75. Iraq al-Amir and the Tobiad City. Iraq al-Amir, in the hills west of Amman, Jordan, features remarkable Hellenistic ruins known as Gezer al-Abd, the Palace of the Servant. This monumental building dates to the 2nd century BCE and is associated with the Tobiad family, a powerful Jewish dynasty mentioned in the books of Nehemiah and the Maccabees. The structure shows Hellenistic architectural influence, large carved stone blocks, decorative friezes featuring lions and other animals, sophisticated water systems. Excavations revealed that the palace was never completed. Construction was abandoned, possibly due to the Maccabean revolt or shifting political fortunes. Iraq al-Amir shows how Jewish elites in the Hellenistic period adopted Greek architectural styles while maintaining their identity. The biblical world was not culturally homogeneous. Part 76. Petra and the Kingdom of Edom. Petra, the rose-red city carved into sandstone cliffs, is one of the ancient world's most spectacular sights. While Petra flourished mainly in the Nabatean period, 4th century BCE, 1st century CE, the region has earlier connections to biblical Edom. The Bible frequently mentions Edom as a neighboring kingdom, descended from Esau. Archaeological surveys around Petra have found Iron Age Edomite sites, though the great monuments date to later Nabatean times. Petra location on trade routes made it wealthy. Caravans carrying frankincense, myrrh, spices from Arabia to Mediterranean passed through here. In 2016, Dr. Christopher Tuttle led excavations revealing that Petra was larger and began earlier than previously thought, with settlement dating back to the Iron Age. Petra reminds us that biblical neighbors like Edom had their own magnificent civilizations, their own stories, largely independent of the biblical narrative. Part 77. Manuscripts from Petra. In 1993, archaeologists discovered carbonized papyrus scrolls in a Byzantine church at Petra. The scrolls had survived a fire that destroyed the church in the 6th century CE. The Petra papyri, as they are called, are written in Greek and document the economic life of Byzantine Petra, property transactions, tax records, family disputes. Though not biblical texts, these manuscripts provide context for understanding how Christian communities in the Byzantine period functioned economically and socially. In 2002, full publication of the papyri revealed details of daily life, the price of wheat, inheritance laws, the role of the church in local administration. The Petra manuscripts show that by Byzantine times, this once Edomite, then Nabatean city had become a Christian community integrated into the broader Byzantine world. Part 78. Madaba and its surroundings. Madaba, in central Jordan, is famous for its Byzantine mosaics, particularly the 6th century Madaba map, the oldest surviving cartographic representation of the Holy Land. The map, discovered in 1884, originally covered the floor of a Byzantine church. It depicts cities, villages, geographical features from Lebanon to Egypt, with Jerusalem at the center. Though damaged, the surviving portions show remarkable geographical accuracy and provide valuable information about how Byzantines understood biblical geography. Madaba and surrounding areas contain dozens of churches with beautiful mosaics, testifying to a thriving Christian community in Byzantine Jordan. The Madaba map and mosaics show how early Christians created visual representations of sacred geography, mapping their faith onto the physical landscape. Part 79. Ejlaun and Jerash. Northern Jordan contains remarkable archaeological sites from the Roman and Byzantine periods. Jerash, ancient Gerasa, is one of the best preserved Roman provincial cities. Though Jerash flourished mainly in the Roman period, it has possible biblical connections. Some scholars identify it with Gergesenes, mentioned in the Gospels as where Jesus healed the demon-possessed man. The city contains spectacular ruins, colonnaded streets, temples, theaters, baths, churches. These show the Romanization of the region in the centuries following biblical times. Nearby Ejlaun features a medieval Islamic castle, but the area also contains remains from earlier periods, showing continuous occupation through biblical, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic eras. Ejlaun and Jerash remind us that the biblical landscape continued to be inhabited, transformed, built upon by successive civilizations, each leaving their layer. Part 80. The treasure of Dido at Carthage. Let us end our 8th act far from the Holy Land, across the Mediterranean in North Africa, at Carthage in modern Tunisia. Carthage was founded by Phoenicians from Tyre around 814 BCE. The Bible mentions Tyre frequently as a major Phoenician city, trading partner, and sometimes rival of Israel. Excavations at Carthage have revealed the splendor of this Phoenician colony. While no treasure of Dido has been found, Dido being the legendary founder, numerous Phoenician artifacts show connections to the Levant. In 2017, archaeological surveys identified the Phoenician harbor, warehouses, and religious sanctuaries, showing how Phoenician culture spread across the Mediterranean. The Phoenician alphabet, descended from the same Canaanite script that became Hebrew, was carried by Phoenician colonists to Carthage, eventually influencing Latin and our own alphabet. The treasure of Dido at Carthage, real or legendary, closes our 8th chapter by reminding us that the biblical world was not confined to Palestine. Phoenician, Israelite, Judean influences spread across the Mediterranean, creating a shared cultural heritage that still shapes us today. Chapter 9. Science, AI, and Modern Debates. We stand now at the threshold of the present, where biblical archaeology meets the most advanced technologies, where the oldest debates take on new dimensions. Part 81. An iron gate at the Pool of Siloam. The Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, where Jesus healed a man born blind according to John. The pool was rediscovered in 2004, triggering excavations led by Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukran. Between 2018 and 2020, new excavations discovered traces of an ancient iron gate or barrier controlling water flow entering the pool. Metallurgical analysis showed this iron dated to the Second Temple period. This discovery testifies to sophisticated hydraulic engineering. The Pool of Siloam was not a simple natural cistern, but a carefully designed and maintained work of engineering. The use of iron in a hydraulic context was rare and expensive. It suggests the religious and social importance of the pool, probably serving for ritual purifications during temple pilgrimages. In 2021, a study by Dr. Amos Frumkin proposed a reconstruction of Siloam complete hydraulic system, showing how water from Hezekiah Tunnel was regulated and distributed. The Iron Gate reminds us that even mundane technical details can illuminate biblical narratives. When Jesus told the blind man, "Go wash in the Pool of Siloam," he was sending him to a specific place with complex infrastructure. Part 82. Blast furnaces in Jerusalem. In 2016, salvage excavations in the Ein Kerem neighborhood of Jerusalem discovered several glass production furnaces dating to the Byzantine period. These furnaces, discovered by Jove Arbel from Israel Antiquities Authority, revealed a highly developed glass industry. Analysis showed the glass produced was of very high quality, probably intended for churches and monasteries. Glass in late antiquity was not merely utilitarian. It was a symbol of light, transparency, purity. Byzantine church windows used colored glass to create plays of light considered manifestations of the divine. In 2019, chemical analyses by Dr. Ian Freestone of University College London showed Jerusalem glass contained traces of sand from the Negev and natron from Egypt, testifying to a commercial network across the region. Some glass fragments bore Christian motifs, crosses, fish, Greek inscriptions. These objects were probably oil lamps or liturgical vessels. The glass furnaces remind us that the Holy City was also a center of craft and commerce. Pilgrims often left with souvenirs, glass ampoules containing oil from holy lamps. The sacred and commerce mingled. Part 83. A cuneiform fragment from the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, Jerusalem's most sacred esplanade, is also one of the most politically sensitive sites. Excavations there are extremely limited, even impossible in certain zones. But in 2007, a controversial yet fascinating project was launched, the Temple Mount Sifting Project. Tons of earth illegally excavated from the Temple Mount were systematically sifted by archaeologists and volunteers. Among thousands of artifacts, coins, pottery shards, jewelry, a small cuneiform tablet fragment appeared in 2017. No larger than a fingernail, bearing a few cuneiform signs in Akkadian. Paleographic analysis by Dr. Wayne Horowitz dated the fragment to the 7th or 6th century BCE, the Neo-Babylonian period. The text appears to be an administrative list, perhaps recording rations or tribute. This discovery, though tiny, is significant. It testifies to a Babylonian presence in Jerusalem, probably during or after the first temple destruction in 586 BCE. The cuneiform fragment illustrates modern archaeology challenges. In a politically explosive context, archaeologists must work with what is accessible, even if only sifted earth. Every fragment counts. Part 84. Ethiopian Byzantine statuettes from the Negev. In 2019, during excavations at a Byzantine monastery in the Negev desert, archaeologists discovered small terracotta statuettes depicting human figures with African features. These statuettes, dating to the 6th to 7th century CE, appear to represent Ethiopian pilgrims or monks. The figures are carefully crafted, showing distinctive facial features and clothing styles. This discovery provides evidence of Ethiopian Christian presence in Byzantine Palestine. Ethiopian Christianity has ancient roots, traditionally traced to the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts. The statuettes may have been devotional objects, or perhaps portraits of actual Ethiopian monks who lived at the monastery. Ethiopian Byzantine statuettes remind us that early Christianity was geographically diverse. African Christians were part of the Holy Land spiritual landscape from earliest times. Part 85. Sacred donkey bones at Saqqara. At Saqqara in Egypt, the vast necropolis near ancient Memphis, archaeologists in 2019 made an unusual discovery: carefully buried donkey bones in what appears to be a ritual context. Dating to around the 5th century BCE, these donkeys were not ordinary pack animals. They were buried with care, in individual tombs, suggesting they held special status. Some scholars suggest these may be connected to sacred donkeys mentioned in ancient Near Eastern texts. Donkeys sometimes had cultic significance, associated with certain deities. Interestingly, the Bible mentions donkeys frequently, including Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem on a donkey. While the Saqqara donkeys predate this, they show donkeys could hold symbolic importance. Sacred donkey bones remind us that animals played complex roles in ancient religion, not just as sacrifices or transport, but sometimes as sacred beings themselves. Part 86. Nabatean pilgrim graffiti. Throughout the Negev and Sinai, archaeologists have found hundreds of inscriptions in Nabatean script, the language of the ancient Nabatean kingdom based at Petra. Many of these inscriptions are simple graffiti, names, brief prayers, dates. They were left by Nabatean travelers, merchants, and pilgrims passing through these desert regions. In 2018, Dr. Leila Nema published a comprehensive study of Nabatean inscriptions, analyzing their distribution and content. Many appear to mark pilgrimage routes to sacred sites. The Nabateans worshipped their own deities Deshera, al-Azza, but also interacted with Jewish and later Christian communities. Some inscriptions show religious syncretism. Nabatean pilgrim graffiti show that the deserts around biblical lands were not empty. They were traversed by people with their own religious traditions, leaving traces of their faith. Part 87. The Sundial of Gezer. At Gezer, that site we have visited several times already, archaeologists discovered a carved stone that appears to be an ancient sundial, dating to the Iron Age II period. The stone has a series of carved lines and marks that suggest it was used to track the sun's shadow, allowing people to tell time during the day. Sundials were known in the ancient Near East. The Bible mentions one in 2 Kings, when the shadow on King Ahaz's sundial moved backward as a sign from God. The Gezer sundial shows that ancient Israelites had practical timekeeping devices, useful for coordinating daily activities, agricultural work, and religious observances. This simple carved stone reminds us that ancient people were attentive to astronomical phenomena, using them practically while also imbuing them with religious significance. Part 88. Herculaneum Scroll deciphered by AI. Let us leave the Holy Land briefly and travel to Italy, to Herculaneum, that Roman city buried by Mount Vesuvius eruption in 79 CE. In the Villa of the Papyri, nearly 1,800 carbonized papyrus scrolls were discovered. Blackened in fragile as charcoal, they were considered unreadable. Any attempt to unroll them reduced them to dust. For centuries these scrolls remained closed. Then in the 21st century, technology changed everything. The Vesuvius Challenge in 2015 offered $1 million to whoever could read the scrolls without opening them. In 2023, an international team using AI and X-ray tomography succeeded in deciphering several columns of text. Deep learning algorithms, trained on thousands of papyrus images, distinguished minute density variations corresponding to carbonized ink traces. The revealed text was an Epicurean philosophical treatise on pleasure. Though not biblical, this technological breakthrough opens fascinating prospects for biblical manuscripts. The Herculaneum Scroll symbolizes the meeting of past and future. 21st century algorithms reading 1st century texts, making the impossible possible. Tomorrow, perhaps, AI will reveal unknown biblical variants. Part 89. The Shroud of Turin re-examined. The Shroud of Turin, believed by many to be Jesus' burial cloth, has been subject to intense scientific scrutiny. In 1988, radiocarbon dating placed the shroud creation at 1260–1390 CE, suggesting it was a medieval artifact. However, some researchers have questioned this dating. In 2013, a study led by Giulio Fanti of the University of Padua used different dating methods, proposing the cloth was much older, possibly 1st century. The debate continues. Critics argue that the 1988 radiocarbon dating was sound and that alternative methods are less reliable. Defenders suggest the tested sample may have been contaminated or not representative. In 2018, forensic analysis of blood patterns on the shroud suggested they were not consistent with a crucified body naturally laid to rest, raising further questions. The Shroud of Turin exemplifies how archaeological evidence can be interpreted differently. Scientific analysis has not definitively settled the question. The shroud remains an object of faith for some, scientific curiosity for others. Part 90. a discipline that also corrects skeptics. Biblical archaeology is sometimes accused of being used to prove the Bible. But the opposite is equally true. Archaeology also challenges both believers and skeptics. For instance, skeptics once claimed writing did not exist in Moses' time. Archaeology proved this wrong. Alphabetic writing existed centuries before Moses. Skeptics claimed Jericho walls could not have fallen as the Bible describes. Archaeology showed the city did have massive walls that collapsed, though dating remains debated. Skeptics claimed King David was legendary. The Tel Dan stele provided extra-biblical evidence of the house of David. At the same time, archaeology has challenged overly literal readings of biblical texts, showing that ancient Israel was more complex and diverse than sometimes portrayed. This balanced approach, challenging both extreme skepticism and naive literalism, is what makes biblical archaeology a genuine academic discipline. It seeks truth, wherever that leads. We have explored the frontiers of modern science applied to biblical archaeology. From iron gates to AI algorithms, from radiocarbon dating to DNA analysis. Now, in our final chapter, let us step back. Let us embrace the larger view. Epilogue. What archaeology cannot resolve. We have reached the end of our journey. 100 facts, 100 discoveries, 100 windows onto the biblical world. But now, let us meditate on what we are truly seeking. Part 91. Popularization and media controversies. Biblical archaeology fascinates the public. Every discovery makes headlines. The Ark found. Jesus' tomb revealed. Proof of the Exodus. But this popularity is double-edged. It brings funding, attention, interest. But it also generates simplifications, sensational announcements, artificial controversies. In 2007, the documentary The Lost Tomb of Jesus claimed to have found Jesus' family tomb in Jerusalem, with ossuaries bearing names of Jesus, Mary, and family members. Most archaeologists rejected these conclusions as highly speculative. Similarly, regular announcements of discovering the true Mount Sinai or locating the Ark of the Covenant feed a cycle of sensationalism that disserves the discipline. Real archaeologists must constantly correct media exaggerations. Popularization of biblical archaeology is necessary. The public has the right to know. But it must be done responsibly, with nuance, with honesty. Saying we don't know is sometimes more important than promising illusory certainties. Part 92. Biblical Archaeology in 2025, a summary. As we approach the end of 2025, what is the state of biblical archaeology? What major trends define the field? First, technology continues to revolutionize the discipline. AI, advanced imaging, DNA analysis. These tools allow us to extract information from artifacts thoughtfully studied. Second, interdisciplinary collaboration has become essential. Archaeologists work alongside botanists, geologists, chemists, computer scientists, creating richer, more nuanced interpretations. Third, there is greater appreciation for complexity. Simple narratives, whether maximalist or minimalist, are giving way to recognition that the biblical world was diverse, contradictory, evolving. Biblical archaeology in 2025 is more sophisticated, more cautious, more honest about limitations than ever before. This maturity is healthy. Part 93. 2024, a rich year in the Holy Land. Looking back at 2024, what were the year's significant discoveries and developments? Several important seal impressions were published, adding to our understanding of Judean administration. New manuscript fragments from the Judean desert were analyzed, revealing previously unknown textual variants. Excavations at various sites Jerusalem, Megiddo, Lachish continued to refine our chronologies and understanding of different periods. Perhaps more important than any single discovery was the continued application of new methods: isotope analysis, remote sensing, computational modeling, gradually transforming how archaeology is practiced. 2024 was not a year of spectacular finds, but of steady progress, methodological refinement, collaborative research. This quieter work is equally valuable. Part 94. What is truly new today? What constitutes a truly new discovery in biblical archaeology today? It is rarely a completely unknown site or artifact. Most major sites have been identified. What is new is often reinterpretation, redating, reanalysis using new methods. New is an inscription that clarifies a disputed reading. New is radiocarbon dates that challenge accepted chronology. New is DNA evidence that reveals trade networks. New is AI that reads an illegible scroll. Sometimes the newest insight comes not from digging but from thinking differently about old evidence, asking new questions, challenging assumptions. What is truly new today is often methodological rather than material. We are learning to see old evidence with new eyes. Part 95. What we can expect for the future. What can we expect from biblical archaeology in coming years? Technology will continue advancing. AI will become more sophisticated at reconstructing damaged texts. Imaging techniques will reveal more hidden inscriptions. Genomic analysis will tell us more about population movements. Climate change may reveal new sites as water levels change and ice melts. It may also threaten existing sites with erosion and flooding. Political situations will continue to affect what can be excavated and by whom. International cooperation will remain essential but challenging. Most importantly, we can expect ongoing refinement of our understanding. Each generation asks different questions, brings different perspectives, sees different patterns in the evidence. The future of biblical archaeology is not about proving or disproving the Bible. It is about understanding the ancient world more deeply, more humanly. Part 96. Science, Faith, and Prudence. The dialogue between science and faith stands at the heart of biblical archaeology. How do we navigate between these two approaches to reality? Science demands evidence, verifiable data, reproducible conclusions. Faith accepts mystery, intuition, revelation. The two are not necessarily contradictory, but operate according to different logics. Archaeology, as a science, can neither prove nor disprove faith. It can confirm Jerusalem existed in the 1st century, but not that Jesus rose there. It can attest to temple destruction in 586 BCE, but not that it was divine judgment. Prudence is required on both sides. Believers should not seek absolute proofs in archaeology. Faith that depends on proofs is no longer truly faith. Skeptics should not use archaeology to demolish faith. Absence of evidence is never evidence of absence. Perhaps the best use of biblical archaeology is to help us read sacred texts with more finesse, more context, more depth. Not to validate or invalidate them, but to understand them better. Part 97. When proofs are not enough. Sometimes we discover archaeological evidence that strongly supports a biblical narrative. And yet, questions remain. We can prove Jerusalem was besieged in 701 BCE. We cannot prove why the Assyrians withdrew. We can prove people worshipped at Shiloh. We cannot prove the ark was there. We can prove crucifixion was practiced. We cannot prove any specific crucifixion was redemptive. We can prove tombs were sealed with rolling stones. We cannot prove any tomb was emptied by resurrection. This is not a failure of archaeology. It is recognition that archaeology operates in the realm of the physical, the material, the empirically verifiable. Faith operates in another realm not opposed to the material, but transcending it. When proofs are not enough, it is because the questions we truly care about exceed what proofs can answer. Part 98. The mysteries that resist. After all our discoveries, many mysteries remain. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? What happened during the Exodus? Did the conquest occur as described? These questions may never be fully answered. The evidence is incomplete. The past is fragmentary. Time has erased more than it has preserved. But perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps mystery is not a bug but a feature. Perhaps the sacred requires some hiddenness to remain sacred. If we could prove everything, verify every detail, explain every event, would faith still be faith? Or would it become merely historical knowledge? The mysteries that resist our investigation remind us that we are finite, our knowledge partial, that ultimate truth always eludes us somewhat. And this is not defeat. It is wisdom. Part 99. What archaeology reveals and hides. Archaeology reveals much. Cities existed, battles occurred, people lived and died and left traces. It shows us the material conditions of ancient life. But archaeology also hides things. It cannot tell us what people thought, what they felt, what their inner lives were like. It cannot access the subjective dimension of existence. We can find a seal impression, but not the hand that pressed it or the intention behind the document. We can find a temple, but not the prayers spoken there or the faith experienced there. We can find a tomb, but not the grief of those who buried their loved one. We can find an altar, but not the awe felt by the worshipper approaching the sacred. What archaeology reveals and what it hides are equally important. The material remains point toward immaterial realities that transcend archaeological method. The seen testifies to the unseen. Part 100. Why mystery endures. And so we arrive at the end. At the 100th fact, the final meditation. Why does mystery endure? Why, despite all our efforts, all our discoveries, all our technologies, do certain questions remain unanswered? Perhaps because the past is by nature incomplete. Archives are fragmentary. Witnesses are dead. time has erased more than it has preserved. We work with fragments, with shadows, with echoes. Perhaps also because the questions we ask exceed what archaeology can answer. Does God exist? Are miracles real? Did Jesus rise from the dead? These questions are not archaeological in nature. But perhaps mystery endures for a deeper reason, because it must endure. Because a faith that were totally proven would cease to be faith. Because a sacred that were totally explained would cease to be sacred. Mystery is not a failure of knowledge. It is knowledge's necessary limit, its insurmountable horizon. It reminds us we are finite, our knowledge partial, that ultimate truth always eludes us somewhat. And yet, we continue to search. We dig, we sift, we analyze. Not to eliminate mystery, but to approach it, to understand its contours a little better. Each discovery does not suppress mystery. It displaces it, refines it, makes it more precise. Why does mystery endure? Because the sacred dwells in the gap between what we know and what we will never know. Because faith lives in this tension between presence and absence, between revelation and silence. Because perhaps seeking is more important than finding. 100 facts. 100 mysteries. 100 windows opened onto the biblical world. We have journeyed from 5,000-year-old Canaanite wine presses to AI algorithms deciphering manuscripts. We have walked in Jesus' footsteps through Jerusalem and explored the copper mines of Edom. At each step, we discovered that reality is more complex, more nuanced, more fascinating than we imagined. Neither the most fervent believers nor the most radical skeptics were entirely right. Truth lies somewhere between absolute certainties. Biblical archaeology teaches us humility. It reminds us the past never allows itself to be fully captured, that sacred texts never reduce to their historical reference, that mystery is integral to our quest for meaning. But it also teaches us hope. Because each year brings new discoveries. Each generation refines understanding a little more. And perhaps one day, our descendants will have access to knowledge that seems impossible to us today. In the meantime, we continue. We dig, we study, we meditate. Not to prove or disprove, but to understand. Not to eliminate faith or science, but to let them dialogue. Not to dispel mystery, but to inhabit it with more wisdom. For in the end, biblical archaeology is an invitation to journey a journey through time, through space, but also within ourselves. A journey toward the origins of our beliefs, our values, our identities. A journey that never truly ends, because there is always another stone to turn over, another text to decipher, another question to ask. Good night, dear listeners. May your dreams carry you to ancient lands, to forgotten truths and preserved mysteries.